It was meant to be the jewel in the crown of the Russian Air Force, a fifth-generation fighter jet capable of standing up against and even exceeding the capabilities of the US-made F-22 and F-35. But it's a failure. The catastrophic result of a cavalcade of mistakes, corruption, and crazy decisions that has left it practically useless to Russia, even as it wages war against Ukraine. It is the Su-57 Felon, and Russia's most advanced fighter jet is so broken that it's too scared to fly over Ukraine. Looking at the jet on paper, it would look like the world beater it's supposed to be. As Front Intelligence points out, the jet is still showcased as the most advanced that the country has to offer. The specifications seem to bear that out, as Aero Corner explains. The Su-57 is supposed to be capable of reaching a cruise speed of almost 1,318 miles per hour over a range of 2,186 miles. That should make the jet perfect for the Ukraine war, as it can reach any target that Russia chooses and fly back to base without the need to refuel. Russia's supposed fifth-generation fighter has a massive ceiling of 66,000 feet, and it can climb up to 64,000 of those feet in about a minute. Army Recognition adds to the impressive specs, noting that the Su-57 has 2 internal weapons bays and is capable of deploying several types of missiles. Chief among them is the R-77M active radar-guided missile, which is perfect for long-range strikes, along with the R-74M infrared-guided missile for when the plane gets involved in an aerial scrap with another fighter jet. The Su-57 has anti-radiation missiles to deal with enemy radars, space for guided bombs, anti-ship missiles, and even stealth cruise missiles designed for precision strikes. Throw a 30mm GSH-31 cannon and stealth capabilities into the mix, and you get a fighter jet that is a major attacking force. On paper, these specifications tell us that Ukraine shouldn't be able to do a thing against the Su-57. It certainly doesn't have fighter jets that can stand up to what the Su-57 is supposed to be capable of delivering. Ukraine is going to receive up to 95 F-16s from its Western partners, CNN reported back in February. But those are fourth-generation fighters that the Su-57 should be able to handle with relative ease. The rest of Ukraine's fighter jets, which amount to a small collection of Soviet-era aircraft like the Su-25, Su-27 and MiG-29s, also can't do much against an Su-57 in a fight. The new Russian jet's stealth capabilities should allow it to sneak up on any of those jets so it can take them out. Speaking of stealth, combining that with the Su-57's immense speed and high service ceiling should mean that it's a nightmare for even the best Ukrainian air defenses. The Su-57 should be a Ukraine killer, a fifth-generation fighter jet that Russia should use to gain air superiority over a nation that is already a long way behind Russia when it comes to sheer numbers of aircraft. Yet, the Su-57 isn't in Ukraine, not really. And it hasn't been since Vladimir Putin launched his full-scale invasion back in February 2022. Though the obvious question arises, why? Some are charitable toward Russia and its decision not to deploy the Su-57. Writing for the National Interest, Brandon J. Weichert says that the Su-57 is being kept out of Ukraine not because Russia is worried about any shortcomings, but because Putin wants to avoid any unnecessary losses of his country's most advanced fighter jet, when Russia has literally thousands of older aerial platforms to use instead. There's a definite logic to this reasoning, which Weichert says is also added to by the fact that Russia needs the West to build more Su-57s. That the Russians used Western components in the construction of the Su-57, and Russia is now sanctioned as a result of their invasion of Ukraine, means that Moscow must be careful with how and when they use these advanced warplanes. And again, Weichert isn't wrong. These issues will have played a part in Russia's extremely limited use of the Su-57, which has seen it restrict its fifth-generation fighter to firing on Ukraine from afar. Western intelligence already noted that back in 2023, Su-57s were firing long-range missiles since at least June of 2022, mostly from well inside Russian airspace, military analyst Wes O'Donnell said. They've been tasked with everything from air defense suppression to precision strikes, he adds. That's all well and good. However, these are things that Russia's other aerial platforms can do, and it seems like a complete waste to use a jet that looks so good as little more than an aerial platform that can deliver missiles while hovering safely over a Russian airfield. This jet should be dominating the skies while making it impossible for Ukraine to launch its own aerial assaults against Russia, but it isn't. And the real reason why, beyond Russia's worries about losing any of the jets unnecessarily, comes down to 2 words we've repeated several times already in this video: on paper. The reality for Russia's first stealth fighter and first fifth-generation fighter jet is that numbers on a page don't mean anything when your jet can't see, can't fight, and can't win. Operational problems abound with the Su-57, meaning it's a far cry from the challenger to the F-35 that it's supposed to be. and is frankly no better than any of the litany of fourth-generation fighters that Russia is already capable of fielding. There were hints about the problems with the Su-57 from day one. After all, this was originally supposed to be a fighter jet built collaboratively between Russia and India. A collaboration would have served as another response to the F-35 program from Russia. NATO allies may be willing to help the US design and build its fifth-generation fighter, but Russia has allies of its own with which it can build a comparable jet. Except it didn't have that ally for long. As The Diplomat reported back in April 2018, India pulled out of working on the Su-57 program early on, citing an array of issues. This was meant to be an 11-year collaboration that would result in one of, if not the best, fighter jets the world has ever seen. But India was gone, and with good reason. For the past 2 years, the IAF, or Indian Air Force, has repeatedly stated its desire to withdraw from the program, citing disagreements over cost-sharing plans, technology transfers, and the aircraft's technological capabilities, among others, the Diplomat wrote at the time. The 4 key words in that statement are the aircraft's technological capabilities. The problem with the Su-57 is that it faced a laundry list of technological issues back in 2018, and practically none of those issues have been solved by 2025. The Su-57 is a paper tiger of a fighter jet, with its biggest failing being the one thing that's supposed to set it apart as a fifth-generation fighter in the first place. It has a complete lack of stealth, or at least terrible stealth when compared to the US-made fifth-generation fighter jets. The Center for European Policy Analysis, or CEPA, highlighted this lack of stealth in a November 2024 article. It points out that effective stealth design is all about reducing an aircraft's radar cross-section, or RCS, to as small a size as it can possibly be. In an ideal world, the aircraft wouldn't show up on radar at all. That's still not really possible, so instead, a fifth-generation fighter should have an RCS so small that it could easily be mistaken for a much smaller flying object that an enemy doesn't have to worry about. It's this small RCS that allows fifth-generation fighters to get the jump on aircraft from the previous generation, in addition to making them much harder for air defense units to track and hit. According to CEPA, the Su-57's radar profile is pretty similar to that of the best fourth-generation. While that makes for a decent RCS, it's not the near invisibility required to make a fifth-generation fighter viable. The Aviation Geek Club provides more details, noting back in December 2022 that both the F-22 and F-35 have an RCS that is between 1,000 and 10,000 times smaller than the Su-57. Part of the problem comes down to the design philosophy Russia used when creating the Su-57. The goal was to modify an existing airframe, the Su-27, to maximize RCS reduction without having to design a new airframe from scratch. The Aviation Geek Club quotes aviation expert Abhirup Sengupta as stating, "So the Su-57 wasn't built from scratch. Russia used an old airframe, likely to cut costs as much as it possibly could, and the result is an aircraft that achieves an RCS that isn't a world away from Russia's old airframes." Beyond that, the Su-57's engines are also a problem, but we'll get to those in a moment. The key point here is that the Su-57 simply isn't a stealth fighter jet, even if it has many of the features you would expect to see on one of those jets. O'Donnell highlights this in his analysis of the Su-57. True fifth-generation fighters like America's F-22 and F-35 have 2 defining characteristics: genuine low observability, radar, infrared, and visual signatures, all suppressed by having a low radar cross-section or RCS, and also supercruise, the ability to fly supersonic without guzzling fuel in afterburner. The Su-57 has neither. So Russia has a stealth fighter that is easy to spot. But that's far from the only problem with the Su-57. In addition to being far too easy for enemy radars to observe, the Su-57 is also half-blind. As David Axe points out in a piece for Trench Art, the Russian Air Force's Sukhoi Su-57 stealth fighters are missing critical components and payloads, including the sensor pods that helps them spot targets on the ground. In other words, the Su-57 can't see the very targets that Putin wants to destroy. What use is a fighter jet that's supposed to sneak in and drop missiles and bombs on Ukraine's cities when that jet can't sneak and isn't able to see the targets it's supposed to be hitting? Front Intelligence reveals more in an August 15th article in which it shares several Russian documents highlighting just how terrible the Su-57's targeting really is. According to those documents, the jets were already being delivered to Russia, and perhaps even its partners, without certain targeting systems that are essential to ensuring the jet is as powerful a fighting force as it's intended to be. Among those missing components is the MPPU-50. This is a module produced using the microchips at the Micro-Prebor plant, which is responsible for building the module, can't obtain due to Western sanctions. Russia's defense ministry also took delivery of Su-57s that lacked the 101KSN electro-optical targeting system back in 2021. That system offers the jet passive infrared detection and all-weather surveillance capabilities. Front Intelligence points out, it's the component that allows the jet to identify and strike targets on the ground, and it simply isn't there in many of Russia's Su-57s. Russia clearly felt that it could put its Su-57s into service in 2021 and add the missing components later, but Putin started the war in Ukraine. Western sanctions came rolling in, and now Russia is left with a supposedly fifth-generation platform that can barely even see. Even if those components were available, O'Donnell adds that Russia's electronically scanned array, or ESA radars, are worlds behind those used by the West. ESA is a must-have for modern fighters. It lets you track multiple targets, resist jamming, and work in different modes without big mechanical movements. But here's the catch. Russia's ESA technology lags behind the US and even most European systems, O'Donnell says. Russia's ESA has few transmit-receiver modules, causing problems with resolution and range. Even what the Su-57 can see doesn't come through with the same clarity as Western 4th and 5th generation fighters can see. Still, at least the Su-57 has some hard-hitting missiles, right? Maybe, but even they aren't as great as Russia needs them to be. In an ideal world, a 5th generation fighter should have the missiles that offer beyond visual range capabilities. Those types of missiles are a big deal. If a jet has to get into combat range to fire, it loses one of the edges it could have over its enemy. However, as Sieber points out, the Su-57 isn't exactly swimming in missiles that can be fired from outside the range of other fighter jets. Aside from the R-37M Axehead, which is designed to target less maneuverable bombers and cruise missiles, Russia has struggled to develop air-to-air missile systems that can match Western weapons in terms of agility, range, and reliability. Russia claims that it has the missiles in development. However, that's not going to do the Su-57 much good right now. The Ukraine war is raging, and Russia could use a fighter jet that's capable of taking out Ukraine's F-16s and Soviet-era fighters without them even knowing that an enemy jet is nearby until a missile comes hurtling at them. So Russia has a stealth jet that isn't stealthy, a modern fighter that can't see the targets it needs to be capable of hitting, and a lack of the missiles that gives the 5th generation fighters an advantage over their contemporaries. How could things get any worse for the Su-57? Engines that aren't fit for purpose, or in some cases just aren't finished, add to the Su-57's laundry list of problems. We mentioned earlier in the video that we would get to the Su-57's engines, and they represent another major problem for Russia's 5th generation fighter. Though India withdrew from working with Russia on the development of the Su-57, Russia still hoped that it would be able to sell the jet to India once it was done. It tried to do just that in July 2025 with a package that included the airframes, localization, technology transfers, and an accelerated delivery schedule, says Defense Express. The problem, according to the outlet, is that Russia made this offer despite the Su-57s not having engines, at least not the engines that India wants. Russia bet the farm on India being willing to wait for the advanced AL-51F1 engine that Russia hopes can solve some of the Su-57's stealth issues. However, those engines are still in their early prototyping phase, with Russia having pushed the completion date back to 2027. India, naturally, isn't interested in buying fighter jets that can't fly, and this engine problem has cost Russia a sale. India said no. As of August 14th, it's snubbing the Su-57 in favor of French-made Rafale fighter jets, reports United 24 Media. That final nail in the Russia-India Su-57 alliance has been firmly slammed into place. None of this is to say that the Su-57 has no engine. As we mentioned earlier, the jet is being used by Russia to launch missiles and bombs at Ukraine from inside Russian territory, so it's clearly able to get up into the sky. However, the new engine that was supposed to power the Su-57 from the start isn't ready yet, and won't be for a long time. Production Felons use the AL-4F1, which is essentially an updated Su-35 engine, O'Donnell notes. It's powerful, but not 5th gen powerful. That lack of the right engine means that the Su-57 has to light the afterburners to go supersonic for an extended period of time, meaning it can't achieve supercruising. And guess what afterburners do? They leave heat signatures that make an aircraft decidedly unstealthy. The hits keep on coming with the Su-57. Front Intelligence notes that the jet's entire development lifecycle was plagued by corruption. Audits conducted in 2025 of the Komsomolsk-on-Amur aircraft plant, Russia's largest aircraft manufacturer, part of Sukhoi Corporation, found that accounting practices routinely blurred costs between military and commercial contracts. Oversight remained largely formal, leaving room for inflated prices and hidden subsidies, it says. Unrelated costs seem to creep into a lot of the invoices the outlet published, showing that Russia's defense manufacturers are skimming off the top, leaving Russia with less cash to invest in its 5th generation fighter. Russia tried to showcase its Su-57s at China's Zhuhai Air Show, the National Interest reported in November. The verdict from China: wholly unimpressive. The jet's build quality was ridiculed on social media, the outlet says, which may mean another potential customer is gone besides India. And even without all of these issues, Russia has another major problem. Ukraine has already proven it can hit the Su-57. Granted, that hit took place on the ground, as the Royal United Services Institute noted in a November 2024 report, but the strike is confirmed. Satellite images confirm it, meaning Russia has lost at least one Su-57 that was supposed to be safely tucked away at an airbase supposedly outside of Ukraine's reach. Is it any wonder why Russia doesn't want to unleash the Su-57 onto Ukraine? There's barely anything of note to unleash. Yes, the potential for unnecessary losses has influenced Russia's decision not to use its most modern aerial platform in Ukraine. But this is a jet that doesn't hit any of the markers a fifth-generation fighter is supposed to hit, regardless of what it says on paper. Its missiles aren't great, its design is still rooted in Russia's fourth-generation philosophy. The Su-57 is yet another victim of Russia's endemic corruption. The two biggest potential customers for the jet, India and China, aren't impressed, and in India's case, have turned their back on it. The Su-57 not being in Ukraine is damage control, a transparent attempt to avoid reputational damage as Russia eyes being able to sell its troubled stealth fighter to other countries in the future. However, there's a twist to this tale. Despite all of these problems, August has seen Russia finally start deploying its Su-57s in Ukraine. Wes O'Donnell revealed this on August 17th, noting that Russia has come up with a new formation tactic for its ailing fifth-generation fighter. One Su-57 provides air cover, while two others strike a target with standoff weapon. We suppose that helps to solve the half-blind issues, but looks can be deceiving when it comes to the true reason why Russia is deploying its Su-57s in this way. It's less about contested dogfighting and more about safely gathering weapons test data, O'Donnell points out. It's a good reminder that combat proven in Russian marketing doesn't mean the same thing as it does in the West. For the Felon, it's about proving the missiles, not the airframe, work. What we have here is a form of Su-57 deployment that is still focused on keeping the jet as far away from danger as possible, with the onus being on missiles rather than the jet itself. Still, the Su-57 is flying in Ukraine. That's not the good sign that Russia would hope it to be, with O'Donnell noting that the increased deployments probably come down to desperation ahead of any newfound confidence that Russia has in its new fighter jet. The Su-57 can at least evade many of the air defenses Ukraine has, that are capable of taking down Russia's Su-35s and other older aerial platforms. But then that just means that the initial reason for Russia's refusal to deploy the Su-57 is now moot. Unnecessary losses now have a much higher chance of happening as Russia's desperation has forced it into flying an aircraft that it knows isn't as capable as it claims to be in Ukrainian airspace. Watch this space. It likely isn't going to be long before we make a video about how Ukraine just shot an Su-57 out of the sky if Russia is committed to the new formation it's created. Fifth-generation fighter, more like fifth-generation flop. If you want to see what happens when a true fighter squares off against the Soviet-era platforms Ukraine has, we can show you. Check out our video, which reveals what happened when NATO F-35s and a Russian Su-24 and Su-27 faced off for the first time. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of Russia's military failings. And thank you as always for watching.